If you're using the 20 by 10, make sure it's cut on the bias, not a straight grain piece, right? So you're cutting that 20 by 10 on the bias. And I've started to drape this side. I've folded in these pleats. Now I'm gonna go ahead and drape it up on the other side. But you can see, even though this is a lightweight fabric, it's got a certain amount of stiffness to it that is, it's not flowing like chiffon. So the drape for this style, if you were gonna make it, you'd want it to be a super drapey material, not something that is this stiff. But if you're draping with a stiff fabric for the sake of the exercise, just fold in your pleats and just kind of let the bias fall in single, okay? And the tighter you drape this, the smaller this piece will be on the 20 by 10. Now, the way that the text, and then after you do this, you'll take your tape and you'll get that armhole shape. Make sure you're not going too low below this bust tape. Have that armhole end at your bust tape. Draw your markings in. Get your side seam drawn in. We don't need to know where the waist is because we aren't sewing anything to it. But as long as your hem is, you want that side seam marked with the pencil. And then of course, either side of your dart and where it ends. So you have those markings in. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you the way to drape this piece with a soft fabric like a chiffon. In that case, you would need 20 by 20. The reason I did this with this heavier fabric is that's probably what most of you are working with. So if you do the 10 by 20, it should give you enough to get a shape, all right? Obviously, the softer the fabric, the more drapey it's gonna be. So I'm gonna take this out for now, and I'm gonna take a 20 by 20 softer fabric, provided me by the lovely Rosa. She had this soft muslin with her. And if you do a 20 by 20, you'll have something that looks like this. Fold it in half to get your bias. And the wonderful thing about bias is when you bring the edges together, the lengthwise and the cross grain together like this, the bias folds right in. So normally when I get my bias line, I pull on it, it just, the threads tell me where that is. And I kind of flatten out the fabric, and then I draw that as my bias line, because the fabric tells me where the bias is. Now I could do it on the pattern with a ruler, like draw a 1-inch square and then draw the lines through it. But for the sake of working with the muslin, it tells you where it is. Okay, so now I can do the way that the textbook is showing us, and their bias edge is actually the bottom. So we're going to use this with the seam. So this part will sew in with the seam. And then you can place your tucks along the side. And then that way, your edge is hemmed already because the fold becomes the hem. So this raw edge will sew in with your black tape line. Or you could leave it loose because this is already finished too. If you don't want to sew it and attach it. Oops, I got it wrong. Put it this way. I think that's kind of the way they sewed it in the picture, is they didn't actually attach it to the seam. So if this is already a clean seam and you've got this chiffon fabric, it'll be light enough to where you don't have to see any seam amount. It'll be finished with the fold on the bottom, and then if you choose to sew it in there, you can, or you can just leave it loose and then finish it with, I wish I had chiffon with me, I should have brought chiffon. Finish it with a bias piece. So the way that they're finishing the armhole on this blouse is they're taking a piece of bias and they're just making it the measurement of the armhole. And that will finish this edge, right, with sewing. Okay. Now, the back drape is going to be the same as the front drape on the body. Do you need to see that done again, or are you guys okay with the back?
They're pretty much the same, right?
It's just the same.
It just doesn't have the...
No, it doesn't have any of this stuff. It's just the first step. But we repeat it to the back, and of course the back doesn't need a dart.
I think we're okay.
All right, so as far as the sides go, if you look at the picture, okay, thank you, Michael. I'm gonna